workshop. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Nordby?
Here.
Councilmember Woods?
Here.
Councilmember Monge?
Here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. Councilmember
I
McKenzie?
answered anything, as you can figure out. Huh?
Councilmember Schweer is absent. Mayor Monge?
Here. Shut down the agenda, please. I'll make a motion. Councilmember Kinsey?
Second.
Second. Councilmember Woods. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Topics.
All right, we got two topics tonight. We're going to kind of flip them around, I believe. So first topic up is going to be the first quarter 2025 budget update, general fund, and enterprise funds, and we have Finance Director Winnick here to discuss.
Well, good evening, Mayor and council members. Is this working good? This item before you in the workshop, I don't know if we can hear or not, but is really kind of giving a just a budget update on the first quarter of 2025. Again, it's early, and you're going to see in there that we haven't received a lot of the revenue, especially in the general fund, because property taxes aren't due until May. We don't get local government aid until June, so you're going to see a lot of that. And it's, this is really a speculation of just looking at everything and kind of trends from past years of where we kind of project that we would be at. So taking a look at the general fund and then our enterprise funds. In our general fund, as you're aware, the city council had approved a balanced budget of about $10.4 million. Right now, we're kind of looking at that for 2025, that we should be running positive about $142,000. And again, it's early in the year. It's hard to really project kind of the components to that. But if we look at the various departments that make up the general fund, right now I've got all of them in kind of a positive mode of looking. You'll see one that has a bigger loss in revenue and then also a bigger expenditure reduction, and that's the building inspections and that's the permits. And just from how the permits have come in for the first 3 months, we'll be down on both revenue and expenditures, but they pretty much offset one another. So it's not it's not really a driving factor in the change of the fund balance. The only one right now kind of that needs to be kept a closer eye on throughout the year is really our police. And that's just because we're finally getting to the point where we're getting a full complement. But when we go through that hiring process, it takes 3 to 4 months in some circumstances to train the individuals in. And when we do that, they're partnered with another police officer, and for that shift, we're paying 3 hours at time and a half of FTO time, field training officer time for those individuals. So we have to keep an eye on that one, because even right now, it's with the backfill, I think we've expended about over $80,000 in overtime. But with the salary savings we've had in the other line items, we've been okay. But that's something that we need to be aware of as we move through the year, and keep an eye on that one. All the rest of them look pretty good, pretty much in line. And then if we kind of look at our enterprise funds, again, change in fund balances that were approved in the budget are ups and downs, but overall, as I'm projecting out for the 2025 variance, they all appear to be positive from where we had budgeted. And I think the biggest one right now looking for a positive is the electric fund. I've got it at about 388,000, wastewater at about 138, surface water at 130. Water fund at 84, and so bottom line is we look pretty good for right now. And again, it's 3 months worth. Things can change drastically as we go through the year, but we'll get on this cadence of having these quarterly meetings, so we're always aware, and so we know, and so we can look at seeing how things are playing out throughout the year. That's our first item. If there's any questions with that, I certainly would take those right now on either the general fund or the enterprise for 2025.
Nope.
Pretty
Appreciate
good.
this.
Yep,
Look
thank you.
forward to the quarterly. That's good news to be able to keep an eye on it, get a good barometer.
The second item, we're going to spend as much time as we want on tonight, because we got the remainder of the workshop, and I think it's really critical that we do talk about this. First of all, there's some pizza, so I want everybody to make sure that they have a little bit of pizza. The reason for that is because we have something to celebrate. This organization has something to celebrate, something that for an organization that is smaller in population, that is carrying as much debt that we do from a ratio standpoint, and that we have a little lower than median income of our residents here. We've achieved something that is actually quite remarkable. To me, what it's a sign is that it affirms what the path that we have been on the last 3 years. I couldn't be prouder of this organization for the accomplishment. I've titled this Planning, Support, and Fiscal Responsibility because that's how we got to where I'm going to show you in a second if you're unaware of it. I'll give you a little bit of a backdrop. As you're all aware, we had a bond sale today. There's an item to pass at City Council about the bond results. When you go into a bond sale, you have a bond rating call, and S&P performed that. And Brian and I, with our consultant, Baker Tilly, Michaela, who will be here later on this evening, we took that call. Brian did a magnificent job of representing the city. Somehow we really emphasized the positive things that have been happening in the past 3 years. And as a result, this is what happened for the city. Our bond rating was upgraded from a AA to a AA+. There's only one more step above that, and that's the AAA bond rating. Will we get there? Not with the amount of debt and not with the other parts. But I think that's something to say about us, because I just pulled out 2 quotes that came out of the S&P rating, which is attached to the document. And I do think it's very important to read each and every word of these 2. The rating change reflects our view of the city's material increase in available reserves to stronger levels than we expected, and we expect it to sustain. It also reflects our view of the city's relatively recent adoption of a formal fund balance policy, as well as a regularly updated long-term operating forecast, which we believe demonstrate its commitment to maintaining structural balance. A prudent approach to financial management, including annually updated 10-year financial and capital plans, an adopted fund balance policy, and routine budget amendments enabling the budget to track changing conditions, further support credit quality. That really speaks volumes, and what that really is coming down to is that we have done an amazing job as an organization, and it's not just one person. This is a whole team. It's a whole organization. This comes from our city council, our city manager, it's our department heads that have made this possible. But it really is about those 10-year capital plans, planning, making it comprehensive, making sure that we're covering everything that we possibly can, anything that needs to be replaced, anything that needs to be purchased. That's a capital item. It's looking at our, our enterprise funds, our internal service funds, our whether it's our park fund, our general fund, and we're doing 10-year financial plans on there, trying to get an idea of what type of rate increases we may end up having to do that as it incorporates our expenditures for our capital improvement plan. It's making a commitment, which the City Council has done in 2025 being the second year, of dedicating levies for some of the items that we've acknowledged that we're not funded at the right level to be able to take care of it. They happen to be infrastructural type of components, and being our facilities, our parks, our roads. And that's a big commitment. And that didn't happen by one person, that happened by a team. And so to have an outside organization write these comments based upon a phone call and financial information that they requested from us to submit to them is really a big thing. And to have it upgrade, I think Brian and I were quite surprised that we got upgraded. We definitely had talked before the call, and it was our desire. We would like to push for that, and we would try to, because we've done a lot of effort from an organizational standpoint to get us there. But we were told by our consultant that it doesn't normally happen. It's very rare that you get an upgrade like that, and that many cities, when they do an upgrade, have to do a song and dance, invite them in invite the bond rater here to kind of show off the city and so forth. And that's where I think, again, our city manager, Brian, did a stellar job of really selling the city and the things the city has done. And that all came from the direction of the city council, past and present. And so I think it's something that we really need to acknowledge that we've come a long, I'm gonna use it, we've come a long way, baby. From the time that I came here, that we really put ourselves in a much better financial position with planning. So planning, what have we done? We've done the 10-year capital improvement plans. We have the 10-year financial plans. We've done policy updates. And you saw that in their comments, where we've updated our purchasing policy. We've updated our fund balance policy. We do budget projections and monitoring. It's that old planning. Support. None of this would have been able to happen if it wasn't for the support that we've received from City Council. Brian had asked me the other day, I had said to him, I said, you realize in July I'll have been here for 4 years. He goes, 4 years? Wow, that's gone quick. It really has. It's gone quick from the standpoint that it's just again, I've said the story many times, from the first day that I came here, I felt welcomed. And almost 4 years later, I still feel that same way and still feel energetic and love coming to work here at the City of North St. Paul. A big part of that is the City Council. It's been very supportive, good questions. Want to find out the information, and that's what staff is supposed to do, give the information so City Council can make the best decisions possible for the city. City manager, my time here, we've had our ups and downs on the city manager. I think one constant that's been there has been Brian. When I first came walking in the door, he was interim. We had a city manager for a little while. He came back in as the interim. Finally, everybody wised up, and we made him permanent. But he's been a great support of mine, he's been an individual that from, again, day one, a lot of people don't realize that he was a very important part of making me feel welcome, because you've heard me say that I came from an organization in Ramsey County, which I absolutely loved. It was my home. I was there for over 32 years. I came here. That's a big change. Brian sat 6 out of 8 Fridays. I like to go and have a good time on Friday. Brian wouldn't let me do that. He'd sit there for hours and talk to me, but made me feel welcome. And then the department heads. I think you realize it. I've heard City Council make the comments. We really have an exceptional group of department heads. We have one in the audience there that is probably, second to none as far as their diligence. I know you probably don't see them, or I'd have to introduce them. But the diligence, you can give him a project, and he's going to be pricing it any which way to make sure that the city's getting the best bang for the buck. Very resourceful. He's very blessed that he has Randy Miller being his superintendent. The two of them work very, very well together. All of our department heads, whether it's Jason Mellinger in our fire department, to John Wick in electric. I should probably say your name, Ron, at Public Works. Ray Rosales as our police chief. And then we'll be having a community development director coming in, I believe, on the 28th. I think the team is very set. That there's a whole different vibe and feel on our department head meetings. We had one at 8 o'clock this morning where, individuals are free to share things and really have those conversations. And that's important. And then staff. At the end of the day, staff is what makes this place successful. And we have some amazing staff. And my familiarity with that is that I see a lot of the community development side and the finance side. Excellent customer service relations. I hear stories left and right, and you see the results. Public Works can snow at any point in time. Those individuals for 6 months out of the year, their lives are on hold. You never know if you're going to be called in, called not, but they're there. Electric. What kind of response time do you have? You very rarely ever see our electricity in the city ever down. That's amazing. And it's just a great environment. I talked to our police force and our fire department, always dedicated, always there. We're finally getting to the point where we're going to be hopefully at full complement in the police department. So we just have so many great assets. And then we can't overlook a person who's sitting to my left who does so much for our organization, in city clerk type of functions and our HR, and that's Jenny. Jenny's been, instrumental. All of that together is what's made this all possible, of getting that bond rating increase. So that's a lot of the good news in fiscal responsibility and I just kind of put some bullets. You probably have a lot of other things, but it's a conservative approach. When we prepare our budgets, we do a conservative approach. I purposefully don't budget all of the interest income that we plan on getting each year. Why? Because we need to make sure that we're going to be able to hold that 50% fund balance in our general fund, and that's important. Our department heads are very diligent, and you've heard me speak to that. Ron and Jason are two of the very best when it comes to that. Financial stability, we've achieved it. We have very good reserves based on our fund balance policy. We're sitting in a pretty good position moving forward. Things can change. It's a snapshot in time. Things can change. There's new demands. There's new priorities, and we're going to get into a little bit more of that in the discussion here as we move forward, taking a snapshot look at the 2026 budget and good stewardship. That's probably one of the biggest importance. I used to present a training in Ramsey County on purchasing and the guidelines for purchasing. And one of the things that I would always stress is to individuals to treat the money as if it were their own. It was kind of interesting. I would talk to people and whether they were having a little home project done, they would go out and get 4 or 5 bids because they thought the price was too high. Yet all of a sudden they come into government and it's kind of like, it's so cumbersome. What do I got to get this bid? I got to get that bid, and that. Just have them do it. What's the difference? Well, we're playing with somebody's money, and we better make sure that we're doing our job and we're being prudent and we're being good stewardships. And I think we do. I think this organization does an exceptional job on that. So here comes now into tough conversations in the future. We start to look at the 2026 budget and kind of a starting point, and this is based on our planning to date. As I've mentioned, that City Council to date for the past 2 years have been dedicating some levy increases to the parks, facilities, and street plans. If we continue that, in which is really required based upon our capital improvement plans, that total increase is $433,000, or approximately a 5.6% levy increase. That's kind of our starting point of where we're at. items that are being discussed by City Council that have not been included in any of our planning in our capital improvement plan to date is the community center as far as the operational costs. We do have the capital in there, as you remember from last year. The HGA park studies has not been included into the capital improvement plan. And then it doesn't include if we're to be seeking any additional staffing levels within our organization. So again, bring you back, we're already at about a 5.6. It does not include any of these. So some of the strategies that we're going to be looking at as we move into preparing the budget for your review and questions is that we're going to be challenging our department heads to reduce costs where possible. And we're going to be taking a hard look at what historical costs have been, why they need those funds, making sure that we are tightening up our budget as much as possible on the expenditure side. We're going to examine surpluses for opportunities to minimize the levy increase. We've done very well. We've performed very well. As you're aware, you know, from the general fund, we had approximately $1 million surplus. Some of that's needed to maintain our 50% fund balance per our policy. Some of it can be utilized. We'll take a look at that and see what we can do. Once we've finalized the audit, then I can start to put together our 10-year financial plans. There may be, if we're performing better in some of the other funds, there may be some excess surplus that's in there based upon our plan. We have to remember, all of that surplus is one time. You spend it, it's gone. So we have to be looking at that and keeping in mind what is our plans, what's in our capital improvement plan. And again, a capital improvement plan is meant to change. So City Council is going to have to balance those needs, and it's going to be balancing those needs, you know, based on those three unknowns that we have right there, meaning part of it on the community center, part of it on our park system, and then part of it if there's staffing needs. But we're going to need part of that surplus to meet the fund balance policy. Again, it's only one-time expenditures because once it's gone, we don't have it anymore. And right now, and part of our disclosure that we give to S&P for the rating is that we were bonding here in 25 per the plan. We're bonding 27, bonding 29 for streets. There wasn't bonding for some other items onto it. And if we vary from that plan, the next time we have a bond rating, our bond rating has a good chance of going down because we're carrying more and more debt. I kind of want to talk about debt for a second to kind of put things into perspective. That there's many times that I hear a comparison with our city and the city of Mounds View. We're comparable in size. Our makeup's a little bit different. We're much more heavily on residential. They have a little bit more commercial. They have a decent fund balance. They're over 50% fund balance. And they actually have some additional fund balance that they have put in that is for future plans, for future expenditures, and still maintaining the 50%. So they're higher in their general fund balance in an aggregate than we are. But we're not too far off of it. But what really hurts us is you heard me earlier talk about there's two components. There's the lower median income and debt. So I just kind of pulled this out of the financial statement for Mounds View for the year that ended 2023. 24 isn't available yet. But governmental activities, which includes your general fund and a number of other funds, and then there's business type. Those are your enterprise. In governmental, they have, at the end of 2023, a total debt of just under $5 million in governmental. Anybody want to guess what ours is in governmental? in governmental, not tax increment, just the governmental. Pardon? I wish. No. See, this is the hard part. This is the difficult part to it. We have $20.5 million of debt outstanding at the end of 2023. Business type activities, Mounds View at the end of 2023, just under 5.2 million. Anybody want to guess what we have? $15.7 million. They're at a little over 10 million, we're at 36. What does that mean?
We got a larger base with commercial too.
Yeah, but what ends up happening is when we have that much debt in our enterprises, for example, means we have to have a higher rate because we have payments that we have to make for debt payments. So let's kind of look at that business since I brought it up. So for 2024, Mounds View had principal and interest bond payments of $431,000. We had just under $2 million in our enterprise funds. So think of you have to raise that much more revenue every year to be able to pay that debt. That's why our rates are,
Just starting off the ground floor.
Yeah.
Much more.
that's why our rates are higher. Now let's look at governmental, and primarily it's going to be your general fund component to it, because that's where you have to generate a debt levy. Mounds View, 474,000. Ours just under 1.6 million. So when you look at that difference of over $1 million, divide that by what our levy is, and you're going to quickly see that, you know, we got about 12% increase in our levy just to cover that annual. What it equates to, that's why we have higher property tax rates. So one of the things that we've been trying to do in our strategies, and we implemented in 2024 and 25 as the second year, is by the dedication of that levy and those levy increases is what we're trying to do is to build up that we are actually starting to pay things more in cash than in debt. And if we can move that way, obviously Mounds View's there. So they're in a much better position that they can afford to do other things. And we can't, so we raise our levy up higher to be able to do that. But in time, if we keep on the plan, we'll be in a position like a Mounds View. But that comes with the pain. As you saw, it's 5.6 to keep on our path that we're at of a levy increase. We can't continue to keep taking the 5.6 and then adding on top of that and ending up being in double-digit levy increases because we have residents and we need to be aware of those residents. And part of that, it's a real tough balance. I think we've been seeing over the past few years, it hasn't really hit the property tax side yet, but we see more and more some of the information that was given, delinquencies in our utilities. Or, you know, we're spending money just mailing out disconnect notices, more staff time talking and trying to make payment arrangements. Part of that is you got a lower median income community and you got higher rates on your water, wastewater, surface water. So our city manager said we have to establish some goals, and taking all of that into consideration and saying, hey, our target for 2026 is going to be a 6% levy increase. I look at it and say, he's nuts. He likes when I say that to him. We're already at 5.6 to keep ourselves on the path. That means I got a 0.4 to play with, everyone, for a levy. That's going to be tough. What are some of the circumstances? Already playing with union contracts of a 4% cost of living increase that I'm going to have to give everybody in 2026. It's like, how am I going to make this? And that's where I gave a little of this information to our department heads today. I don't think any of them like me right now. No, I'm just kidding. Is that we're going to have to challenge our department heads to reduce costs, find
Yeah.
ways to. I'm sorry.
Are you able to put your thing on the middle again? Oh, sorry. I'm blind.
Is it back?
It was there to start with.
Was there earlier.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that, Dan.
So we're going to be challenging our department heads. And I have no doubt that they're up to the task. Excellent group. We're also, our city managers also said our goal is no utility rate increases. I told you he was nuts. Just kept on getting better. And he said if we have additional requests or needs, we need to start prioritizing what those are. In other words, what he's saying with that is that we got a capital improvement plan. It's going to change. We've looked at it. We'll just take like the HGA parks. If we start to put that into our capital improvement plan, we can't afford it. So what comes out? How do we prioritize? What's the highest priority? Staff definitely will try to do that, but that's where city council is really going to have to weigh in on the vision of the city and how do we get there? What do we implement? Things will not be done overnight. They're going to take time and planning, but that's part of what planning is all about. And then we try to identify and make sure that we have the funding sources over time to be able to get there. And that's the path that we're on. And again, our bond upgrade is showing we're on the right path. So we got to keep doing that. And then his goal is to hold our current staffing levels to where they're at. Right now, my own perspective of what I've been seeing, I think we're good in all of our departments. I'm not hearing department heads asking for positions. I know towards the end of last year, we had the police chief talking about the future and a number of additional positions that are needed. Right now, and even going into 2026, I think that's premature. And the reason why I say it is because we've had so much vacancy. We really need to get to the point where we're steadily on a path of full complement and being able to see what are the numbers of responses and so forth before we start moving forward with adding additional staff on that side. Let's see what we really have. We haven't gotten there yet. We've been close a couple of times, even underneath Police Chief Babenroth, and then all of a sudden we end up losing a lot. And so I think right now we're at 3 vacancies. There's some hiring out there. Our investigator just came on board on Monday. Seems like a wonderful individual. He was one of the 4 that was vacant, so we got 3. So we're getting close. I think by about June or July, we hopefully will be at full, and hopefully we stay that way for a while. But before we start to adding staffing levels, I think we need to achieve that. The rest of the departments, I think we're pretty adequately funded at this point in time. Not to say that things won't change in the future, but that's kind of the city manager's direction is really that we need to look at that. And we have to take in the perspective that if you add an FTE to the police and they're a police officer, with benefits, that's pretty close to a 2% levy increase to be able to afford that. And again, with the target of 6%, that just would be very difficult to do. So I'm going to leave you right there in questions, and I want to have a dialogue of kind of where we're at. Questions, how does all this sound to you? What are your thoughts? Are we heading in the right direction? Kind of throw it out there.
Yeah. I think that this is definitely, you have to start somewhere. And I think the city managers position is a great place to start. We may need to adjust it, but yeah, you have to start, again, you have to start somewhere. What opportunities exist outside of levy increases for funding for some of the other projects?
For other projects, there's always, the opportunity, and I don't know if they exist or not, but there's, usually grants that are out there that, we need to make sure that we're pursuing if they're available. I can't tell you which ones are off the top of my head or out there, but I mean, that's always an opportunity. At the end of last year, we talked about some of those components of looking at the revenue side, and some of those were, the cannabis. Is that a potential for a revenue source? At the end of the day, it's either you have to increase your revenue, and hopefully it's not just tax levy that's going to our, to our taxpayers, that you're generating additional revenue, or you have to cut your expenditures. And that's, where we're at. Now, from the budget perspective, we're going to go at it at first of looking at, okay, is there ways that we can cut that budget? So let's look at, kind of the reality of things. And yeah, a lot of it's due to, at times, of vacancies and so forth. But in the general fund, since I've been here, we've probably been averaging about $800,000 worth of surplus every year. So that means there's an opportunity to cut something. I'm not saying that there can't be a time where there's an emergency and we go above that. Well, that's where we come back to City Council and you allocate some of your fund balance to cover those needs and components to it. So we do need to make sure that we're more in line with kind of the actual components of where we're at. And so that's our first look at it. The other revenue thoughts that were given there, looking at, I think, the potential of a downtown like snow removal fee. Again, that's not wouldn't be a huge amount for us. But we also need to be aware that, the state is going to be faced with some challenges ahead. When I talk about that, it's not necessarily in the biennium of 26 and 27. Right now in the 26-27, they're looking at a deficit of about $456 million. That's a little bit of an improvement from their prior estimate. The real problem is going to be in the 28 and 29. Right now, they're looking at a $6 billion deficit. And that's part of what the governor right now and the House and the Senate are challenging with, is that they need to start making some cuts now to kind of alleviate that big hit in 28, 29. We have to remember.
We all know cuts go downhill. So
Yeah.
cuts to the city, and then we have to turn around and do the taxpayers.
That's exactly where I was going. And one of our biggest components for us that we're at risk is local government aid. And that's over $1.6 million for us. And you remember that there's been multiple years in the past where they've talked about cutting that. And then that went away. And then in the past few years, it's been increasing. But that is something that definitely could be, could happen to us. And so the question we need to ask ourselves are we prepared? Yeah, we're prepared right now, but we're not prepared if we start spending too much of that surpluses in our surpluses, meaning, our fund balances, and we put ourselves, and then we're not ready for that rainy day component to it, and then our only choices are to increase the levy even that much more. We don't want to be in those positions, and that's why, again, right now, we're sitting very, very well from a financial position, but all of that can be changed and distorted in a moment. We also have to be aware, and this was part of the conversation after I called our city manager nuts, that he gave me some of his reasoning behind it. And part of it is that we're just in really some uncertain times, our nation. Are there tariffs that are going to be coming and start to increase different costs? Are they not? What kind of impact they're going to have? Brian and I were sweating all weekend long on this bond issuance that we're going to approve tonight. Why? Because, you know, if you looked at this, it wasn't just the stock market that went up and down. It's really confused the heck out of the bond market. And that's probably more troubling than the stock market is, to be totally honest with you. And you can see a lot of experts will say the same thing. Things aren't reacting the way they should. When the Feds meet in May, more than likely there's not going to be a reduction in the rates. Why? Inflation's starting to tick up again. So there's so much uncertainty that's happening, and it's not just happening in the U.S., it's global. So those are things that we have to be aware of. Unemployment is looking as ticking up, and so again, that can impact our residents. And so that's where, you know, Brian had come up with 6%, you know, in his mind was getting to about the most that he wanted to see us being at, you know, unless there's some other needs and there's justifications, but that's kind of where how he came up with that target component to it. So there's a lot of uncertainty. We were, you know, if you looked at just last week, bond rates went up 50 basis points. That's 0.5%. Also, just like that. I'm on the phone with Michaela on Friday and talking to Brian. You know, we're looking at the possibility of the interest rates being upwards to 1% higher than we had anticipated for this bond issuance. We were on calls on Monday. We had to make a decision. Do we pull it? Because it goes out. It went out today, and the sale was at 10 o'clock. Do we pull it? We at the 11th hour yesterday, we got a little bit of good news from our consultant that a sale had gone, and it actually got some pretty good rates. And so we threw the dice out there, and we decided, okay, you know, we're going to go for it. So we had the sale today, and it came in to where we thought it would come in. It didn't go the high route to it. And so, you know, we'll be making the recommendation tonight for City Council to approve that. But we were faced with, and this is another component, the reason why I'm saying this is kind of a reason why we do need to be moving over to that cash basis versus debt basis, because we're reliant on whatever those interest rates are. That 1% change over 20 years amounted to, in principal interest, and obviously it's going to be interest, increase of $864,000 on that $6.7 million bond issuance. That's a big change. Now, I look at it and say, you know, we're going to be showing you tonight overall true interest rate. What we got was about a 4.02. Even at 5, historically, that's not bad. I mean, we can go back to, you know, early 80s and you can see 14, 16%. But what's that type of an impact? How would we, if they start to rise up that high, how do we do 27 bond issuance for streets or 29? Or if there's other needs that we end up having. For instance, let's say City Council makes that decision and say, hey, you know, I want to take care of the McKnight Field and I want to do everything that HGA had said. Only way we could do that today would be going out for bonding. If we were to bond with the uncertainty, what happens if all of a sudden it's an 8%? Well, we couldn't afford it if it was at 4. How do we do it at 8? So those are some of the risks and concerns that, you know, we're moving forward in the environment. But the good news is we're positioned very well right now. But what it really means is that we have to continue planning. We need to have, and we need to challenge one another. We need City Council to challenge us. We need to make sure that we're prioritizing things and we're doing the right thing according to our vision for the city with the resources that we have. And yes, directly, Councilmember Woods, we do need to look at other revenue streams to make sure that we're not just so heavily reliant on the property tax. We do need to find some other revenue sources to help offset that. It's imperative.
So on average, right now, this was 5.6 something, whatever.
5.6.
Yeah, 5.6. Is that kind of like, is that gonna be like we're gonna start off on most years? I mean, because when you say $20 million in debt, we gotta pay that debt. And
Yep.
We gotta do all this other stuff. So I mean, is this pretty much gonna be, a minimum of 5%? Because I don't know how much of this 20 million will be able to be bought down, how big, is there any kind of bonds or anything that are coming up that are bigger ones that are gonna fall off?
Nothing's falling off. We had one fall off this year, but now we're putting one back in, if it gets approved tonight. No, nothing in a real close
So we can expect.
pace, yeah. But, what that really is, so how I have it in the plan, if you remember, when I look at debt, I'm keeping for our 10-year street plan, I'm keeping our debt as if it were the same. Even if it goes higher, I'm keeping it the same. As long as we levy that 3.25% for streets, once that debt goes up higher, it just means more of it gets shifted to debt and less goes to the streets, if that makes sense. So like this past year, on that 3.25%, which, amounts to, maybe about $225,000, because we lost a bond payment out of there, about $460,000, I get to take that 460 plus the other and put all of that to streets. So we actually, and then there was a little bit more, but it was actually like $800,000 that moved over to streets to keep that level playing. Now, when the debt in 25 will bring us back to where we were, 27, 29 will go higher, we still are at that 3.25 for the street component to it. So at the end of the day, it's not the debt necessarily driving that component because I've got it planned out for the 10 years. It's yes, we're gonna be at that 5.6 every year unless we use, and that's part of the strategy, is that are there some surpluses? Because the streets, parks, facilities, a lot of those expenditures are one-time expenditures or capital expenditures. I mean, they're recurring as far as a useful life is concerned, but we can then take some of that surplus and maybe, for instance, if in my plan, and I haven't had a chance to get to this point, so in my plan, if 1% of a levy increase over the 10 years means that you would have generated, I'll say, $500,000 for sake of conversation. $500,000, but we have a surplus of $500,000, we may be able to lower that part of that 5.6 down as a levy increase.
Because what you said before makes sense too, because as we do more, then you have more interest payments, then less roads, until either you put more in that levy fund, or
Till we move over to more of a cash basis.
otherwise less and less.
Yeah.
How often do you guys sell off your bonds? Is it once a year, or is it a right time, wrong time, end of the beginning of the year, end of the year? How do they do that?
Right now, we're on a 2-year cycle. That's sort of 25, 7, and 9 are the years for the bonds that are included in the capital improvement plan. You obviously, to get the work done, the work can't begin until road restrictions are pulled. And so you want to be ready to go, May time of the year, April, May. May is usually the time you want to get started. So to be able to get ready for May, this whole process started last year with our engineer, WSB, starting to do plans and working with Ron and Randy to get the plans on what's the next road that's going to be done and start to get preliminary cost estimates. And then we started the whole bond process to correspond. And you see, we kind of timed it out pretty good because was it Monday, Tuesday that bids came in for the roads? Bids just came in, you're going to see tonight, to award for the job. And at the same time, you had a bond sale today to award for basically the funding for that streets. So we time things out pretty good, but it's usually going to be in the first quarter of the year for sure that we do that. So it's every two years.
Well, right now, we got the debt, so the only way we can do it is to spend more conservatively and budget better, because we have to pay that.
Yep.
And that is something that we gotta do, so.
Correct.
On our side, which we've been doing the last few years, is making sure we're not piling on, so.
Right.
that's-
So that $20 million that we have as debt, how often do we make a payment on that?
Yep.
Or to drop the debt down, or how often do they make payments like this?
Yeah.
Once a year? Or?
So your regular bond payments are principal and interest are due February 1st, and then August 1st is just interest. So basically, principal is once a year. We look at it every single year based upon interest rates, where the bond rates are at. If it's hit a certain target, like this bond, and I think it was Councilmember Nordby had asked on this issuance, we're locked into this for 10 years. After the end of 10 years, we could refund it. So if the interest rates were better than we have now, and we can save enough by refunding it, we would refund it. Because anytime you issue bonds, there's issuance costs, there's other costs that are associated, no different than if you refinance a mortgage. And so we need to make sure that we're going to hit that break-even point, and then we refund. So we have, and then if we end up having enough cash in the debt fund for that bond, when it's down to about the last 2 or 3 years, there's a good opportunity that there might be. Part of the reason for that is because you're required to levy 105% of your debt payment. Part of that is that 5% over is supposed to be, to make sure that if you have some delinquent taxes, that you've got enough money to make your bond payments. But this city has been very good, has had very low percentages of delinquencies on property taxes historically. So there is money that gets accumulated in that bond fund. And so we've had the opportunity that in the last 2 years, we've accumulated enough money to make those payments so we can pay early and pay off that debt a few years earlier. So in other words, instead of the 20 years, we've been fortunate enough to get, sometimes 18, 17 years being able to pay off a debt. Or we'll look at it, can we refund to get lower interest rates? In other words, reducing our interest in payments.
So has it been below 20 million prior, where things keep adding up? Or is it on a depletion of the amount that you owe each year that we're paying off?
Good question. Until this year, that's been going up. And so we just had a bond that was originally issued, off the top, I think it's for Public Works facility. It was refunded because there were lower interest rates from the original issuance. So that one last payment was in February. So we did not levy for that in 2025. So you levy in 2025 for the bond payment that's in 2026. So you levy, so you have the money at the end of the year to pay it in February 1st. We didn't have to do that for that issuance.
Growth from all the projects, getting the growth of the new places like Anchor and all that, is that a lot of the bonds for the roads and things like that, the construction that was done for those places?
A lot of those are underneath TIFs. So,
Which is a different one.
which is a different, yeah. So in other words, part of
Yep.
those taxes are being captured, yeah, underneath the TIF to pay off those bonds.
Reconstruction
Yeah.
for like the new downtown.
Yes. Yep.
That's where a lot of
Yep.
it has been.
And that's where a lot of it has been, yeah. So to answer your question, it had been on the rise up until this year, then it went down, and now with this bond issuance that we just had, barring the approval of city council tonight, it'll bring us back to where we just were. And then obviously 27 to 29 will raise it up again. But again, that 10-year plan has it that you won't notice that because you've been increasing, again, if you're holding to that 3.25% for streets.
And 5% 5%, when I first moved here in 96, we're, you know, it was $1,000, $900 a year,
Right.
5% on that, but now the average is like 4,000 probably around here, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Around 4,000 something.
For per
5%
property?
On top of that,
Yeah.
it does become.
It adds up. It adds up, yeah. Yep, and that's kind of the challenge of where we're at. Again, you've heard me say this, you know, eventually when you're paying cash, you're saving. And that's where that, again, you know, and I always use just the rule of thumb of, you know, $1 million at a 5% for 20 years is you're doing a principal interest payment of about $80,000. That means over 20 years, you paid 1.6. You just heard me say the example of 1% increase on tonight's would have amounted to $864,000. That's how much it can impact, but if you got the cash, you don't have to worry about those things. But at the end of the day, you know, we do have infrastructural needs, and so we do need to figure out a way to be able to do that. And I think the path that we've started with this planning, I think we're doing an excellent job. And again, the really thing that we need to look at is, you know, again, there's two sides to the equation, revenue, expense. How do we cut expenses? We all know what our expenses are. So that's open for conversation with City Council. How do we reduce that expenditures? You know, if you look at our general fund, you know, you saw the departments when we looked at that. You know which departments that there are. You know, how do you reduce those expenditures in those and providing the same level of service? The other side to it is revenue. How can we generate more revenue without it being that property tax component? And that's a tough one. There's a lot of work that needs to be done with that part.
Dan, Brian, I can't thank you guys enough. This increase in the bond rating is amazing. You guys need to take a moment to pat yourselves on the back, both of you, and thank all your staff as well. Absolutely amazing. So thank you. Two questions. A, does this bond rating increase, is there any opportunity there to help with our prior debt? Depending on how aggressive you choose to be, is there any room for play there? And B, when do we need to start the conversation, if this is something the council chooses to do, on the tax moratorium? So when it does end, if we choose to, for revenue generation.
Okay, you have to give me a little bit more explanation on that one. The first one is, does the AA plus help us on our current? It could help us on our current, again, depending on where interest rates of the existing bonds are and where they were. That plus basically says we have less risk, which means it lowers the interest rate that you would get. If that change from where we were at, well, what we would have gotten in the market changes enough through an analysis that says we can refund, then yeah, we could end up then switching that from a no refund to a refund, and be able to save some money from that. And again, we look at that on an annual basis.
Okay.
And so we'll do a review now, just on this past year at being AA plus and where rates are in comparison, and see where we're going to end up and see if there's any opportunities. Second one, explain a little bit.
The sales tax moratorium.
Oh, yes. Oh, sales tax, I think. Yeah, that should be ending. And so we need to take a deeper dive onto that. Usually it's for a, you know, more of a specific type of project that you're, you know, generating that sales tax for. So we do need to take a look and start to plan that and have those discussions.
I just want to make sure we're having the conversation at the appropriate time, so if we choose to, as a council, we can be at the ground floor of when that moratorium's over.
Yeah, and so I think, you know, this year is the year I think we need to, I think it was University of Minnesota Extension offers pretty reasonable services in doing the sales tax, and a number of cities around us have taken advantage of that, and I think we need to end up doing that, yes, this year.
Another thing, oh, you want to say something?
I was just going to say, you know, we did implement a couple of different fees for this year, commercial fires.
Oh, yes.
Reconnect fees,
Oh, late payments.
So we have implemented some of these.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yes,
Good.
good point.
When I became mayor, one of the things I asked from both you guys is the good, the bad, and the ugly on everything, and so I really appreciate that, because we need to have everything, and I'm glad we're comfortable enough where you bring it all to us. So we need to know it all. We need to understand, and so it's good to be able to have the frank conversations, to understand where we're at, where we need to be, what's good and what isn't working, so I just want to say thank you to everybody there for that too, and of course, the AA plus was excellent news, and thanks to everybody at the city. Everybody did such a great job to be able to get that, so.
Dan, I don't know the answer, but like today, when doing this bond, they said you had to do 10 years.
Correct, that's what I had, yeah.
And is that the same with all, like even previously?
I can't answer that off the top. I definitely will go and look at them. Most of them have, most have hit past that 10-year piece to it that are governmental. So yeah, so that's what we look at every year to make sure where the rates are and if we can take an advantage of that, yeah.
The rates are considered what the feds put out each day, week, whatever, right? What the feds are putting out,
Well, that's a part,
the feds are putting out every day.
yeah, well, it's a part of it. It really is driven by the market, demand, supply and demand. The Fed's interest rate is really kind of brings kind of like the bottom. You're never going to see rates go below that. So when they were, ratcheting up in interest rates, all interest rates then go up even higher than that. So eventually, when they get to the point where they can start to lower it down, again, their target is a 2% inflation is what they've been working at and saying for quite a while. If we got to that point, we'd see the interest rates going down, and then the market would then hopefully adjust to that. Again, right now, for weird reasons, the bond market isn't reacting the same way as it traditionally would, based upon the stock market move too. So we have to keep our eyes on that. But yes, we are diligently always looking and analyzing to make sure that if we can save something. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else?
Nope.
No, thanks again. Appreciate everything.
Thank you very much.
Any other business that you're looking at doing for tonight? If not, I'll call for adjournment.
So moved.
So move. Councilmember Woods.
Second.
Councilmember McKenzie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. We'll come at 6:30. Good to see you. How are you?
Yeah, good to see you. How you doing?
Oh, I gotta go in Thursday.